Yo, what's up, guys? My name is Yuki Mirai. I'm a transformational coach, energy healer, and I help you heal in mind, body, and soul and recognize your true potential. Today, we'll be talking about people pleasing. We've all struggled with it at various different times in our lives. People pleasing is a common pattern that I struggled with for a long time. Okay? I'm a recovering people pleaser, and a lot of people that I work with and a lot of people that I meet struggle with a similar pattern, right? I want to talk to you about what causes the pattern in our nervous system, personal experiences that I've had, and my family dynamic and my childhood growing up that led to me people pleasing, and some of the things that I've done in order to rewire that pattern, and some things that you can do as well in order to start shifting that pattern and reclaim your sovereignty, right? People pleasing can have many deleterious and negative effects on us, both mentally, physically, and emotionally. It drains our energy, and it constantly puts us in survival mode so that we are scanning for threats in our environment everywhere we go. And as a result, we're not able to express our authentic truth and speak our truth in the moment and speak up for ourselves, right? It leads to porous and lack of boundaries, and it leads to people running and trampling all over us, right? It leads to passive aggressiveness, it leads to resentment and anger, and it leads to an inability to be seen as truly as we are and to be seen for who we are, right? And it leads to diminishment of self-love, it leads to diminishment of deep connection intimately and with other people in your life, right? And then the biggest thing is that it leads to a huge void in our souls and our hearts, right? And our soul is trying to bring us home, right? But these are deeply ingrained patterns that take some time to start to shift, right? Noticing, becoming aware of what's actually going on, having the skill sets, perception, and the tools to get us out of it, right? People pleasing is very prominent because we're constantly taught to put others before ourselves. And by putting others before ourselves, we are somehow a good person, right? But that doesn't work for too long. And ultimately, who it hurts is not only ourselves, but everyone around us, because now we're not able to come as our highest expression. Our energy is not able to flow. We're not able to speak our truth, right? So we're not able to present ourselves in our truth and bring our medicine into the world because we're always placating, we're always appeasing, we're always changing who we are in order to be accepted and loved by the people around us, right? And this ends up being very inflammatory to the body, right? You're constantly in survival, scanning the environment. So you're in fight or flight, right? You're never in a parasympathetic rest and digest state because your body keeps the score and it understands your patterns that are driving this chemistry, right? And your body cannot stay in survival for a prolonged period of time without rest and recuperation before it eventually breaks down, right? So this is a prominent pattern that I see in people that I work with, and also in myself, that I had to work months and years to unravel so that I could start speaking my truth. I could start standing up for myself. I could start asking for my needs and not feel ashamed or guilty about it, right? So that I can express my truth while still being loving, serving, and connecting from my highest self, right? We can have the cake and eat it too, right? What I discovered in my journey is that people pleasing is not always bad. And it does help us survive. It does help us connect. It does help us serve. It does help us bring people closer at various different times. But if that's the underlying prominent pattern that's running all the time, that's where the imbalance is. Because I truly believe that there's no black and white. Nothing is completely good and nothing is completely bad. There's always reflective awareness, right? If you study Dr. John DeMartini's work, he really talks about this reflective awareness to where both sides are simultaneously happening. If you study Carl Jung's work, the shadow and the light, right? And the integration leads to self-actualization, right? And individuation. So a lot of teachings point to this. When you look at Taoist tradition, which is ancient Chinese spirituality, talks about the yin and the yang, opposite polarities. You guys saw my video about masculine and feminine, right? So two sides of the same coin. So, excuse me, got some itchy eyes. All right. But in this case, it's people pleasing versus assertiveness, right? Speaking your truth, right? Unapologetically, while still staying loving, compassionate, and understanding of people around you. And we could have both, right? Because when I was first healing from this pattern and noticing, becoming aware, and shifting it, I went from one extreme to the other, right? I had to learn in the extremes so that I could come back to balance. So I started learning boundaries. I started speaking up for myself. I started using my voice. I started asserting and asking for my needs, right? I found that I went to the other extreme to where I started getting a little bit cold. I started getting a little bit heartless, right? And I started running that pattern on the other extreme to where now I was not being considerate of other people's feelings, emotions, and needs. So I swung from one extreme of people pleasing to where I was putting other people's needs, feelings, and wants before mine at all costs in order to feel safe. And when I started learning this work, I started shifting towards the other end of the spectrum, to the other extreme, to where it was all me at all costs at the expense of other people, right? So there could be a harmony and a union to where we can merge both sides so that we can come back to balance, right? And people pleasing shows up as the fawn response in the nervous system, right? So constantly scanning your environment, right? And appeasing and placating to the people around you so that you feel safe. And the biggest triggers of these are obviously, like most things, back in childhood. There was a chaotic environment in our household to where either one or the other parent or both were not able to meet your physical, mental, emotional needs. Maybe one might be abusive, maybe one might be distant, maybe there was chaos between the relationship between your families, siblings fighting. So your nervous system was not able to settle and feel safe in that environment. As a result, you became hyper vigilant. You started to scan your environment to look for threats and danger in your environment because nothing felt grounded and safe in your home. And as you're a child, your psyche is developing, your brain is still developing. And when that process is going on, your subconscious mind is wide open and you're pretty much in a hypnotic state to where you're very susceptible to information coming from the outside. So how a parent treated you when you were young, in your infant and growing years, anywhere from 1 to 8 or 9 years old, Your subconscious mind is wide open. Your brain waves are in a hypnotic state, so you're suggestible to the environment. So if your mother and father were fighting and there was tension in the home, the infant you, the inner child in you, the brain could not decipher if they were mad at you or if it was just about them. And they weren't able to decipher that. So you took that to heart and you felt like you were a bad person. And that's where the shame begins. They are mad, they're not getting along, it must be my fault. Because when we're in the infant years, in the developing years, we are actual complete narcissists to where everything is about us, right? Because I poop, you clean it up. I'm hungry, I cry, you feed me. I want to play, I scream, I yell, I do my thing, right? So as we're coming out of those years, our brain starts to develop, prefrontal cortex starts coming in line, rational thinking. Now we're able to decipher between subject and object. And now we're able to decipher, okay, this is me, they are them, and we need to coexist. But before that, it's all about us. So everything going on in the environment, we're scanning. Okay, dad is mad. I did something wrong. Mom is distant. I'm not lovable. There must be something wrong with me. I'm not enough. So you see how from an early age, these patterns develop in our nervous system, and it shapes our perception of the world, and as a result shapes our behaviors, patterns. And in this case, when we talk about people pleasing, there's many different factors, but there's two that I uncovered that are the deepest triggers of this. And it's, like I said, chaotic family environment, not feeling safe either by mom or dad or siblings, right? So it enforces a hypervigilant pattern in the nervous system. That's number one. And also either conditional love or emotional needs not being met by either parent or both, right? So possibly your parents may have withdrew love for you if you performed bad in school, or maybe if you didn't go to church, you were scolded at, and then they retrieved love. Let's say, for example, mother was distant, right? Was not able to connect, and because of her own traumas and wounds, she was not able to pour into you and give you the emotional love that you needed, even though she did her best, right? You took that personally and you felt like something was wrong with you and that you're not enough because she's not giving that to you, right? Now, as an adult, you're able to reflect a little bit because your brain is fully developed. Now you're able to reflect and be like, oh, wow, her parents didn't give that to her. She had her own trauma, so she was blocked off. And now I understand why she wasn't able to give it to me. But before all that rational thinking and higher level order of thinking develops in a child's mind, everything is about them. And as a result, we take everything completely personally, right? Due to our nature of thinking the world revolves around me. So if we don't observe the patterns, become aware of it, and begin to do the work to dissolve the patterns and become aware and extract the wisdom, then those patterns end up sticking into our adulthood. And then when the patterns end up sticking into adulthood, those patterns repeat in our relationships, in our work environment, everywhere around us, because we never were able to solve the dilemma. I don't want to call it a dilemma, but the patterns that were ingrained in us from childhood. And those things don't just go away, right? Those memories are deep in our subconscious. Those belief systems get ingrained in our psyche and in our mind and literally shapes the world around us, how we perceive it, and how we view ourselves internally, mentally, physically, emotionally. So going back to people pleasing, like I said, not feeling safe in the environment, chaotic upbringing. Either it doesn't have to be anything vast, right? Emotional neglect, right? Doesn't have to be complete abuse. It could just be that your mom was passively aggressive, you know? You made a mistake and your mom scolded you for it, right? You felt like she withdrew love in that moment, so the love was conditional. So now you felt like in order to please mom and get the love, I need to do what pleases her, right? I need to appease to her. I need to put my needs down and I need to appease to her in the moment so that I can get that love, right? Because love to a child is a basic survival need. right? So when the what love gets withdrawn, it really, really puts a dent in the psyche to where that event was a major event in the unconscious and in that child's mind. So it remembers it, it takes a snapshot of what's going on in the moment, ingrains it into your brain so that your brain can remember it. In order to survive and be loved, I need to do said behavior so that I can get that love, right? So as your nervous system gets wired in this pattern of people pleasing and survival, it begins to show up, right? And when it begins to show up, it puts your brain state in a very survival state to where now you're constantly scanning the environment. Okay, they're upset, it may be because of me, right? So you're constantly checking on people and making sure everyone is okay at the expense of your own needs and well-being in order for you to feel safe. And you can see how that downward spiral begins to affect the physiology, the neurology, your psyche in a negative way, right? And we become more and more distant from our own needs, our own desires, and our own truth because we don't feel safe enough to drop in unless everything out there is well and okay, right? So now let's talk about my personal examples of what happened to me and why this pattern was ingrained for so long until I became aware of it, started shifting it. Still not perfect. I still catch myself in that moment, but now I become aware of it. I create space and I'm able to shift and reflect and move it through. So from the outside, my family looked incredibly normal, incredibly loving. Look, just a basic average family from the outside, right? You know, parents are together, healthy, nice siblings, couple pets, nice house, right? Until I started doing this work, I didn't realize what was contributing to my behaviors and my patterns and why I was showing up the way I was in the world. And it gave me a lot of reflection and deep understanding and also compassion for myself because I used to be very hard on myself about, oh, why did I do that? Or, man, I was such a, crazy child. What the fuck was I doing, right? But as I began to learn the patterns and why I did certain things, right? I was able to forgive myself and I was able to forgive my parents for what they did as well. And understand that we're all just messy human beings doing our best. And what I did in my teenage and child years that was deemed unacceptable was actually me just trying to meet my needs in the moment, right? I was acting out so that I can get the love, affection, validation, and attention from my parents. And it gave me deep compassion and understanding and forgiveness towards myself. And it was some of the most healing stuff I've ever done, right? So let's talk about my family. Mother, father, first generation immigrants from Japan, born and raised in Tokyo, Japan, right? I was a first generation American, right? Japanese American. So born and raised California, United States, right? So it was a lot for my parents to come from a completely foreign country over here to the United States, right? So I thank them dearly for it because I was able to experience multiple cultures as I was growing up. And I think it gave me a lot of perspectives on how, and it gave me deep wisdom and understanding that the way people behave and their outlook on life and their belief system is very deeply ingrained in how they grow up in a specific culture, right? And I'll give you specific examples of this, how Japanese culture differed from American culture and how those differences conflicted in my worldview and led to certain behaviors from my parents that ended up affecting me in the near future, right? So my parents came from Japan. And I have two siblings, younger and older sister. We're all 2 years apart, so I was the middle child, right? There are certain things about the middle child syndrome. I won't go into that in this video, but parents came from Japan and built a great life for us, you know? Father was in real estate, working alongside my grandfather, who owned mobile home parks in Las Vegas, Nevada. So financially, we never really struggled much, right? There were times where it was rocky, you know, and Father let us know, but overall, we had a comfortable, great life, right? Deeply grateful for that, right? And I also saw some shadows within my family, right? There were some patterns between mother, father, even the siblings, and my perception of it as well that really shaped my beliefs about myself, the patterns within my nervous system, and how I behaved in the world. So, mother and father, their relationship, you know, from the outside looked like a beautiful, loving couple. And in many ways they were. And at the same time, there was a constant tension going on between them, okay? We can tell that they had resentment towards each other for various different reasons. Mother having resentment towards father because father was controlling and didn't let her do certain things at times with family, things like that, you know. And mother resented father for that, you know. Father resented mother because when they moved over here to the States, my whole mom's side, right, came to America together. So my mom had all of her family together within us, within a close proximity to where she can go and visit them at any moment. They could visit us, right? So they had that close bond. And I think my dad openly said that he was jealous and envious and had a little bit of resentment for that he had to come over here with her family, you know, and while his entire family is still, his mother and father and brothers are still in Japan. So that was constantly a little bit of a feud going on within them. So they loved each other, but they also resented each other. So we were confused, you know, because my mom did everything for my dad, and my dad did a lot for my mom as well. And they were always there for each other, you know. At the same time, we were confused and didn't know if they actually loved each other. So you can see how that could mess with the child's psyche, right? And you can tell there was some underlying tension all the time. So we were kind of confused, constantly trying to read the environment and how they were responding, you know, and trying to really understand what was going on in their dynamic. So that was the number one of the things that led to a hypervigilant nervous system scanning the environment, right? And I want to talk about my mother and father individually now, and some of their patterns and some of the things that they did, right, with love and compassion, right? Because I've done a lot of work on this, and now we're just objectively speaking, so that I can paint you guys a picture of what actually happened. So let's start with my mother, right? So beautiful, loving woman. She gave me a lot, and she did a lot, you know, and I thank her dearly, right? And she had some shadows as well, like anybody, right? So my mother and father were deeply devoted to their spiritual walk. They were Buddhist, and they would a certain lineage of Buddhism, and they were actually higher ups in the temple, and they would consult people spiritually and pray for people, you know, and that was like their number one devotion. And one thing that I really loved about them and inspired me and the number one thing that I took for them was their devotion and their conviction and their unwavering faith towards their spiritual path that they never wavered from, you know, and there was something very sacred about it. At the same time, what I noticed was that their love was conditional at times. And I would notice that, you know, early on they were pretty pushy about it, you know. They were never like, threatening or, threatened to, abandon me if I didn't go. They didn't get to that extreme, but I noticed that when I would go to temple, when I would, appease them and go to the services, and start to dabble in the practices, I would notice that their love for me grew, and then they would pour into me more and they would validate me more. So at that moment, I started to think that love is conditional from them, right? That if I do certain activity, they will love me more. If I appease them, even if I didn't truly want to or desire to or believe it in the moment, as long as I get the love, then that's what I want and that's what I need, right? And if I didn't go, then I could tell, they would either get angry or they would get disappointed. Not to the point like it wasn't like super harsh, but I could tell there was an underlying tone of disappointment and at times even a little bit of fear mongering of like, hey, like if you don't follow this path, then your life may not turn out, beautifully, And I could tell that everything that they attributed to good in their lives and our lives was because of the faith that they followed. And I think there's something beautiful to that, and I still believe that partially too, because I know that it's not just a physical realm, and there's a lot of spiritual activity going on that does influence the physical. So I do agree with them partially, but growing up as a child, when you start to see the conditional love and the swaying of their love as a result of what you do for them, you start to ingrain that into your belief system of like, oh, wow, maybe I'm not enough. Maybe I'm not lovable if I don't do what they tell me to do. If I don't appease them, then I don't get the love, right? So you can see how this pattern starts getting ingrained. My mother was amazing, and I know she loved me dearly, and she did everything for me, right? Well, one of her shadows was that due to some blockage or possibly some childhood stuff or being modeled that from her mother, right? It was hard for her to emote. It was hard for her to express how she was feeling emotionally, right? She would hold things in and then end up coming out passive aggressively towards the children, not really too much to my father, but towards the children, it would end up coming out passive aggressively at times. And then one of the biggest things that triggered me with my mom was that I would make a mistake. Let's say, for example, I dropped a fork or maybe I dropped a small plate and it broke on the floor. Her tonality in the moment, right? She would often say things like, "Nani yatte no?" which is like, "What are you doing?" in Japanese, right? Or like, "Baka janai no?" which is like, "Are you stupid?" And these things seem harmless, at the moment, but as a child, when you hear those words, and especially the biggest thing is the tonality behind the words, you start to believe it. You start to think like, wow, like I'm not allowed to make mistakes. If I make mistakes, I'm a bad person. If I make mistakes, then she will withhold love from me. So now I need to be perfect in order and appease them in order to get the love, right? So that's where the perfectionism starts to come into play, right? You're afraid to make mistakes and be yourself because of the ramifications of love being drawn away. And perfectionism and people pleasing, man, they're like brothers and sisters, with the same DNA. I've never seen people pleasing not be accompanied with the same intensity of perfectionism, right? They just seem to always harmonize and become unison with each other. And that was the case for me as well. I learned that I can't make mistakes because mom will withdraw love from me. I need to be perfect, and I need to scan my environment because I don't know what's going on, right? So nervous system was constantly on alert as a result. Another thing was that mother couldn't emotionally meet my needs in the department of, you know, emotional affection, telling me I love you, even giving me physical affection. And this is not entirely her fault. You know, she had her own shadows to where it was hard for her to emote, and that was also ingrained in her personality. At the same time, Japanese culture, this is where we go to the cultural differences, like I talked about earlier. Japanese culture is way different from American culture, to where it's not common to physically emote, to physically show affection, to like even hugging our family members is like super weird, and we never did that. Let alone kissing, and let alone like them telling us I love you, you know, and emotionally validating us in that capacity. So for me, there was a disconnect growing up because I saw, growing up through the American school system, I would see my friends, they would go to their families, they would be hugging, they would be kissing, they would openly tell them, I love you, son, I love you, from the mother and father. And me coming back home and not getting that from my parents, I felt like I wasn't lovable. I wasn't enough. Why am I not getting that from my parents? So I started comparing the two dualities, right? And I do not fault my parents for this because it's ingrained in the culture, right? And when I look at other Japanese families, it's pretty similar, to where it's not common practice to hug, kiss, tell your family members I love you. It's a pretty rare occurrence, if ever, right? So, although my mom had that shadow, a lot of it was cultural, to where it was hard for her to emote, show the affection, and as a result of her not having the frameworks and the skills to process emotions, she would a lot of times shut down, right? And she shuts down, you know, and she goes kind of within, and as a result, the passive aggressiveness comes out, right? So I was afraid to make mistakes around my mom, and I was kind of constantly scanning her, making sure to appease her so that she would love me, right? And then if I did make mistakes, a lot of times I noticed that she would withhold that love and go silent, or, you know, and I was deathly afraid of that. Like, oh wow, what if she, you know, takes it away and abandons me forever, right? And these are thoughts that go into a child's mind because we're in survival, right? We need our caretakers to take care in order to survive, right? So you can see how the people pleasing started to develop at a young age as a result of some of the disconnect culturally, and also some of the things that my mother did that put my nervous system state in a hyper aroused, hyper vigilant state, right? So that's one side of the spectrum. And my mother did everything for me, and I love her dearly, and she's an amazing mother, and none of us are perfect, right? So that's one thing that I did notice, you know, and I've done a lot of forgiveness work on that as well, knowing that she didn't get that from her mother either, you know, and she didn't have the capacity or the tools or the frameworks in order to give me that, right? But noticing that freed me, okay? So let's go to my father's side now. Amazing, amazing man, and I love him dearly. And rest in peace, Dad. He's up in the skies watching over us, right? He passed away 4 years ago, and you know, it was pretty sudden, you know, but his health was declining slowly but surely through the years. He had chronic kidney disease, and for about 7 to 10 years he was struggling, you know. So although I would love his presence and his support, I know that he's in a better place now in the spiritual realm, right? So he did a lot of good in the world, And when we went to his funeral, there were hundreds of people that showed up, nothing but good things to say, and he touched a lot of lives, So my father inspired me in a lot of ways. And like my mother, they're deeply devoted to their spiritual path. And my father was, you can call even almost a fanatic, like that was his number one mission, to free as many people from their suffering through their religion and their spiritual walk. So, but he had his own demons as well, right? Like we all do. And the number one thing that really inspired me about my father was his deep devotion to his spiritual path, even through the storm of his physical health condition. And till his deathbed, he stayed convicted. And even when his physical body was breaking down, he was continuing to serve people, And I deeply admire that about him. And his kidneys were breaking down, so he would go to dialysis multiple times a week, because when your kidneys break down and are not filtering your blood anymore, you need something external to filter the blood because your body's not being purified and cleansed, right? That took a toll on him, so he eventually started doing at-home dialysis where they stick a tube up his belly into his bladder, and then they extract the urine into the bag. And then my mom was by his side the whole time, cleansing it or helping him clean, taking care of him. So in many ways, their relationship inspired me because although they had the tension, although they had their differences and the resentments, they stuck it through till the end, And that's something to deeply admire and consider because I feel like this society that we live in now, especially in the West, in the States, people just give up real quick, And we live in a very self-absorbed culture and narcissistic culture to where if I don't feel good, then it's time to leave, right? If it's boring or if it's not satisfying, then I'm going to leave, right? If I don't feel good or if I'm triggered, then I'm going to leave. Divorce rates are rising as we speak. It's about 60% in the States now. And it's an astronomical number and it's only rising, right? So the fact that they stuck through it, through the hardships, through the difficulties, that's another thing that really inspired me about them. So father was deathly ill. And even through that illness, he was continuing to serve people at the temple. He would go to the temple even when he couldn't walk much. He would go on a walker. He was still running his meetings because he had a lot of people that were counting on him, that were part of his, lineage that he was serving. So I saw that and I was deeply inspired by that. Even when he passed away, he was at his desk, he was reading the scripture and he was taking notes, and that was the final breath he took. So he was devoted till the end, despite his physical limitations, right? And I saw a double life that he was living. I saw that he would, in the day, go to the temple, serve his people, do the prayer, and then at night, he would come home and drink till he's completely drunk, right? Basically every night, right? So I saw that there was some incongruence there, right? And that he had, his shadow was that the trauma of leaving his family behind, not being able to spend time with them and coming to the States in a completely foreign land. And also some childhood stuff with his upbringing and my grandfather being very strict on him. That was a trauma. Couple incidences that also traumatized him. And I think given the fact that he didn't have the tools and the frameworks, although the spiritual path and the religion really helped him, get through many difficulties, I think not having the framework to be able to process, sit with difficult emotions and move it through, as a result, the alcohol became his best friend in order to numb the pain and kind of distract himself from the pain. And yeah, he pretty much drank till the day he went, And as a result of the suppression of the emotions and some of the anger that he had, at times it would come out sideways, right? And for the most part, he was very loving, very nurturing, and at times it came out sideways, like I said. And one distinct time, I remember in 8th grade, we had moved across town to a different middle school. And I come out of class and I'm walking home. And I kind of had a weird feeling, like I'm pretty intuitive, so when something's about to happen, a lot of times I know something's up already, right? So I'm walking back, I open the door to come in, and there my father is, and he's just standing posted right in front of the door. And I've never seen a man this angry in my entire life, in my entire 31 years here, still to this day. Eyes were bloodshot red. I could really palpably feel the steam coming off of his body, when someone's incredibly angry and you could almost like taste it in your guts, right? You can taste the anger. That's how mad he was, So the first thing he says is, "What have you been doing? You think I don't know what you've been doing?" And then I just look at him, I'm like, "What are you talking about?" I'm just trying to play it off. And then as he says that, he pauses and just looks at me. And then all that's running through my mind is, what the fuck did I do? What did I do this time? Oh man, what did I do? And then it hits me. He found the bong. He found the weed and the bong upstairs in my room. I'm like, oh my goodness, my life is over. My jaw just dropped, heart started racing, palms started getting real sweaty. I knew I was fucked in that moment. Because keep in mind, at that time, 15 years ago, 15, 16? Yeah, I think 15 years ago, weed was illegal in the States. It wasn't as socially acceptable, even in American culture. But in Japanese culture, it's a whole different ballgame. It's like a whole different planet. Weed is like meth or heroin over there. Like, not many people smoke, and if you do, it's incredibly frowned upon, right? And I think, yeah, it's a Schedule I drug over there. So if you get caught with it, they're going to put you away for years, right? So coming from that framework and that old school Japanese mentality, that was the biggest betrayal for him that I can do, It would be like me smoking a meth out of a pookie, just as bad. So what happens is he drags me up the stairs, and I'm already crying because I know I'm cooked, right? It's like my shirt is ripping as he's dragging me up the stairs. And as I enter my room, he just slams the door. I enter my room, beautiful teal blue walls, nice, beautiful balcony with the beautiful light coming in. But at that moment, it was like I entered a black hole. I look to the left at my wooden desk. I see my backpack, and I see my bong there, and then my sack of weed. And keep in mind, I had a good chunk of weed, like a Ziploc full this big, Good chunk. And in that morning, I remember I smoked before I went, so I was already kind of high as I came back home, right? And I forgot to clear out the bong water in the bong. And any of you guys that smoke or have smoked, you know that after you smoke, you always want to clear the bong water because the bong water reeks of resin and weed, right? So me being too high and ignorant in that moment, the one day I forgot to clear the bong water, it was probably reeking my entire house. It makes sense that he caught me. And he already had an inclination that I was up to no good, right? So I think he was already scanning, like, okay. And then that triggered it. And I see the bong, I see the weed, and then he looks at me and he's like, how long have you been doing this? And I'm like, and I try to play it off like, oh no, that's my friend Matt's. I'm just holding it for him. And then he knows I'm lying at that point. And I just start crying and I just break down and then I tell him the truth. And he's like, okay, we're gonna take this. You're gonna come with me and we're gonna go straight to the police station. I'm gonna turn you in, right? And you wanna mess with me, then I'm gonna make you pay for it, basically. So he drags me back down the stairs. At this point, you know, I was cooked, you know. I was just like, okay, oh Lord, how long are they gonna put me away for? And I'm just worst case scenario thinking. And then opens the car door, just throws me in the back, and can't tell you, that was the most awkward, tense car ride I've ever had, still to this day. He's just completely silent, and he's coming for blood. You know, you can just see his eyes. He's just going 70 down this normal intersection, and I'm like, fuck. I hope he gets a speeding ticket or something, so he could just pattern interrupt him and just like get him out of his anger right now, right? So we get to the police station. He drags me out of the car. I'm literally dragging and I'm just bawling at this moment. I'm a fucking mess, right? We go through these sliding doors, and then there it is, right? There's a little clerk right there, lovely little lady sitting behind the desk, and he signs my name, and he just like slams me right there, and then he's like, "Is this what you really want?" And he's just yelling at me at this point. And then the lady, poor lady behind the screen is just like, she's just astonished like by how angry this man is, right? And I'm like, no, please, like, I'll never do it again. He's like, are you ever gonna smoke again? And I was like, no. And I forgot what he said after that, but luckily, you know, he gave me his grace and we exited, go back in the car, driving back home, completely silent again. And as you see, that experience was very intense, you know. If a normal kid got caught with weed, you know, most parents would not go that far, right? They would just maybe ground him, maybe take away the PlayStation, maybe, you know, but my dad had that like fire within him, you know. Yeah, I think it's a lot of the suppressed emotions that he wasn't able to deal with, and at times it would just completely come out as rage, right? And I know now that, you know, it came out of love. Like, he felt like that was the best way to reinforce better behavior, right? Through negative reinforcement. Could he have been more gentle with the approach? Probably. But, like, again, he was taught that from his father, from my grandfather, because he was very strict. So back in the day in Japanese culture, that was a normal practice, you know, like getting spanked, getting, you know, like that was like, yeah, of course, you know. So if you weren't doing that, it's like, oh, you weren't parenting correctly. So you see how all these cultural narratives, their upbringing, really shaped how they parented us. And for the most part, they did a great job, you know. But recognizing the shadows, recognizing what formed your character traits, your personality, really helps to understand, right, why you do what you do. So in this case, with my dad's anger, after that incident, and even before that, there was a couple, and after that as well, but I was always on edge, you know. Now that I look back at it, I never felt safe, you know, because, and I even more had to be perfect in order for me to not mess up, because if I made that mistake, he might blow up, right? My mother may withdraw love. That was her pattern. My father will blow up in his anger. So different sides of the spectrum, but still led to me not feeling safe and being more hyper vigilant. As a result, I had to please father, I had to please mother in order for me to feel safe, right? So yeah, you could see how these examples really shaped the belief about myself, my perception of the environment and the world, and as a result, my patterns, behaviors, and psychology, right? And also, I want to talk about some things that really inspired me about my mother, right? Although my father was controlling, right? And at times he didn't let her do the things that she wanted to, right? My mom always stuck with him, right? Till death, she was cleaning his shit when he couldn't go anymore. He was cleaning his pee right by his side. He would cook meals for him. She would do everything in order to please and take care of my dad, right? And the fact that they had such strong faith in their spiritual path also is what kept them together, I believe, And through thick and thin, even though my mom wasn't completely happy in the marriage, and we could all tell as children, a lot of her needs were not being met because of my dad's behavior, but she still stuck with him, and she loved us children dearly, right? Even though she had the shadow of not being able to express, holding in emotions, pulling away at times, having very harsh tonality towards us and harsh criticism. That was her way of loving us, right? And she did her best, and she did a hell of a job. And to this day, she still does so much for us, right? She gave us everything we needed. Just that emotional aspect was missing, which led to some patterns in my nervous system as well. So nobody is good or bad completely, right? Nobody is light or dark completely. Everybody has a shadow, right? And if we can acknowledge that within us, now we're able to see others with that same compassion and love, right? So now I have a very balanced perspective on how my parents parented me. They did a lot of things very well, and there were some areas of opportunity that affected us as well, and not the best way. So I wish for you guys to eventually get to the point of balance as well. As you do this work of reflection, awareness, acceptance, and release, coming to the point where you can forgive your caregivers. You can forgive whoever was around you. You can forgive people who hurt you or people who shaped and molded you to the person you are. And this is not about neglecting your experience, your trauma, or the pain that you went through, or even forgetting about what they did to you, right? It's about acknowledging that pain fully and the emotions that accompany it fully, and acknowledging how painful and difficult it was, and acknowledging the resentment, the anger that may show up as a result, right? Letting yourself sit with that so that it can move through you, right? And this is not, there's no prescription on how long this process takes. Excuse me. Each person is different, right? Each person has a different timeline of healing, right? And I truly believe that everyone can get to this point, right, of peace, of forgiveness, of freedom, right? Because whatever we're carrying, no matter what somebody else did to us, it's only hurting us, right? If we continue to harbor that anger and resentment towards what somebody else did to us, including our parents, then we're holding that dense energy. and it's weighing us down. It's lowering our vibration and our frequency. And we're constantly replaying the memory, and it's only hurting us, right? And it's holding us back from releasing, opening, and letting something more beautiful come in, right? So, through my personal experience, you can see how the hypervigilance, the scanning of the environment, the appeasing of my parents, and living in fear led to me people pleasing as an adult, led to me constantly placating and appeasing and checking on other people's feelings, thoughts, in the environment, because I always felt that way as a child at home, right? And these patterns are deeply ingrained, and a lot of it's unconscious, right? So until you let the repressed material surface and clear it, and have the proper frameworks and the wisdom in order to move through it, usually these patterns stick, right? So once you notice this pattern and become aware of it, like I talked about and dissected it for you now, what can we do to shift it? That's the $1,000,000 question. In order to shift this pattern, right, we must first become aware of it. First step to change is always awareness, right? You saw how I broke down the patterns in my mother-father home dynamic. You saw how I brought awareness to what was going on within me as a result of it, of how they parented, their psyche, their actions, how it molded and shaped my nervous system and my patterns, right? So that's the awareness part. So I would invite y'all to either get a piece of paper, or if you're more of a thinker and you dissect and assimilate information very well, then just start observing and thinking about, okay, what happened in my childhood? How was my relationship with my mother? How was my relationship with my father? How was their dynamic, and how did that affect my current state of being and how I perceive the world and my patterns, right? Did I really feel safe at home? Did I feel understood? Did I feel heard? Did I feel connected? Did I feel loved? Did I feel supported unconditionally, right? And chances are, if you're living with any human being, chances are some of those boxes were not ticked, because none of us are perfect, right? So I would observe the patterns and shine light on them without judgment and all compassion and love, right? And start writing it down or jotting it down in your mind. Okay. Mom did this. Mom acted a certain way. Dad did this. Dad acted a certain way. And how did I feel in that moment? What was I doing, right? And how did my behavior shift as a result of them doing this, or them acting this, or them treating me in a certain way? And then you start to dissect the patterns, right? And now you start to dissect the patterns and become aware, right? And now you're already instantly creating change. Because when you become aware of something, it instantly shifts, right? Not instantly, but you're already causing a shift in the particle. So in quantum physics, if you look at the double slit experiment, an object that is shined and perceived upon changes, or a particle, right? So when an observer observes a particle in quantum physics, the particle instantly changes. But when the observer takes his observation off of the particle remains, right? So similarly, as you shine light and become aware of whatever pattern, it's instantly creating change on a deep cellular level, right? So you become aware of the pattern, and then the next step is full acceptance of where you are currently and what happened to you then, and how it shaped you, and fully accepting it in the moment, right? This is what happened. Okay, I accept it. Can't change it. This is how I am as a result of what happened. In the moment, I accept it fully. And acceptance is not resignation, right? So just because you accept something doesn't mean you're giving up. It's the biggest difference. This biggest misconception. When you accept something, you surrender to the fight and the resistance to it, right? And whenever you're fighting something or resisting it, it's going to stick. What you resist persists, right? So by you letting go of the resistance and accepting it, okay, this is how I'm showing up. This is what it is. That's what happened. I cannot change that, and that's exactly what happened. And you accept the past, present, as it is, right here, right now. And in that surrendered space of acceptance, now you're able to think clearly, right? Now you're creating space for a new possibility, right? Because if you're tense, resistance, contracting, protecting, then you're blocking the flow of energy. And when you block the flow of energy, information cannot come back in, right? You're blocking the flow of abundance, blocking the form of love, of information that can possibly help you to move forward, to shift this pattern, right? So awareness, acceptance, okay? And once you accept it, what do? Now, we allow ourselves to sit with the difficult emotions, right? You became aware of it. Now you accepted it. Now let's clean up the shit, so to speak, right? So what was it that I was feeling? Or what is it, how am I feeling right now, right? Because emotions don't know past, present, or future. They're all happening now. So what arises within me as a result of reflecting upon what happened to me, and my overall perception of said experience, right? Whatever arises, can we observe it non-judgmentally with compassion and see ourselves fully and see that inner child within you that didn't get their needs met in that moment, right? That inner child within you, that little boy or little girl that didn't feel safe in that moment, that felt like they weren't loved, that felt like they were in danger, right? Can we hold space for that inner child, right? Without trying to change it, without trying to fix it, can we just hold space and be there? And allow whatever that's there to just be there, right? Holding space for that child that couldn't get that from mom or dad, right? That scared little child where mom and dad didn't have the capacity or the wherewithal to hold in that moment. Now, you take your power back by you becoming that parent. You becoming that emotional container and space that you desperately needed from mom or dad in that moment, right? This is the most courageous work that you'll ever do, right? But when you face the dragon and slay the dragon, you're able to free yourself from years and years of pain, suffering, right? You're able to come back home to yourself. You're able to establish sovereignty within yourself that I can be there for myself. And nobody outside can give that to me because I'm here now, right? And through that peace and safety that you develop within yourself and that self-trust, the emotions will naturally clear, right? And once those emotions clear, and it doesn't take a long time, by the way, but what stops it is your resistance, right? Your thought patterns about the emotions, that stops the flow. Like, oh, this is too much. Oh, I'm never going to come back. Oh, I'm going to be traumatized forever. Oh, I can't. It's just too much, right? So start with little titrations, okay? Rome wasn't built in a day. The Great Wall of China cannot be broken down in a day. Little by little, can you start sitting with that? 10 seconds at a time, 30 seconds at a time, and just breathe into it and be there. And the number one thing here is to not try to change it, not try to fix it, and just let it be. Like the Beatles, let it be, let it be. And can you open up your palms without clenching, fighting, and just be there with the all-loving presence that you are, right? Becoming the consciousness observing your experience instead of being consumed by it, right? Becoming the witness and the awareness behind the pain, right? Like holding space for a beautiful child in front of you or your best friend that's going through it, right? You're just there. You're not trying to change or fix it. You're there, you're letting them have the experience, right? And little by little, you start to peel away the layers, you clear the dense energy, and now you're free, right? So let's go over it again. Awareness of the pattern, right? Starting to reflect, starting to analyze without judgment, with compassion and love. What actually happened? Why am I this way? What did mom do? What did dad do? How did I feel in that moment, right? Start jotting it down. And then acceptance. Accepting how it is right now, fully. Accepting what happened in the past, fully, right? This is what it is right now, right? And then sitting with the accompanying emotions that arise as a result, that are still within you, because the body keeps a score, and your body and your subconscious mind never forgets, okay? And then you slowly start to dissolve those patterns, right? And if you do it consistently, right, with love and compassion, you'd be surprised how quickly that dissolves, right? And you'll know when it dissolves because it's a level of freedom and peace that you've never experienced, right? And once you do that, now we can go to the tangible mindset stuff, the tangible stuff you could do in your daily life that'll help shift the pattern even more, right? So once we dissolve the emotions, right, what we can do now is get a mental framework and start working on belief systems, right? So belief systems. What are the belief systems that I still carry as a result of what mom, dad did to me, right? And how I felt in that moment as a result, right? So for me, let me give you an example. One of the biggest belief systems that both I and most people have ever worked with or came across, whether they like to admit it or not, believe, I'm not enough. I'm not enough and I'm not lovable, right? Those are prominent belief systems mostly everyone operates from, right? I'm not enough, I'm not lovable, right? And if I don't do A, I can't receive love. If I'm not loved, accepted by the people around me, then something's wrong with me, right? You see how everything is external, right? If everything is not going right out there, then something's wrong with me. I'm not okay if everyone else is not okay, right? So identifying these belief systems, and these are pretty universal, by the way, so you don't have to, it'll come pretty quickly is what I'm saying, you know? It's usually somewhere along the lines of I'm not enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable, I need to achieve, perform, appease in order to be lovable, acceptable, and likable, right? I need to be perfect just to be barely acceptable, right? If someone doesn't like me, then there's something wrong with me inherently, right? So start dissecting those belief systems, right? And once you do that, ask yourself, you can write it down on a piece of paper, is this belief true? Right? Objectively speaking, if there's a loving God and a loving universe, is this actually true? Right? And if you were to ask your parents this question, would it be true? Right? Not to say what they say is a depiction of the answer, right? But more often than not, your parents would deny whatever belief system you have, right? They would say, of course you're lovable. Of course you're enough. Of course you deserve love, right? Of course you're inherently enough and lovable, right? And if your mother or father is too far gone, right, you may not be able to get that from them. And that's okay too, right? And know that whatever they say is not a reflection of what you are, right? So either end of the spectrum, that could be a good exercise, right? Because if they say no and deny that, no, you are not lovable, you are not enough, right? Just know that that's their pain that they're carrying. And the fact that they can't give it to themselves, of course they can't give it to you, right? And now you're able to start having mental boundaries, discernment. And now with your prefrontal cortex and your rational thinking, adult brain and higher self, you're able to start reframing and rewiring those belief systems, thoughts, right? Because a belief is just a thought that you think over and over again until it gets wired into your neurology and eventually into your subconscious and unconscious. And it becomes your identity, right? So if you continue to catch those thoughts as they come up, right? And ask, is this true? Does my highest self agree with this? At the highest, how would God perceive me, right? Whatever higher power that you believe in, right? And if you don't believe in a higher power, that's cool too, right? At the depth of my soul and my being, is this true? And 100% of the time, if you sit, it will tell you no. And at times, it will try to say yes, right? But that's the ego mind, right? That's the self-critic, right? That's the critical part coming in. And know that that's not your truth, because thoughts aren't facts and you don't have to believe every thought, right? So the fourth step, after the awareness, the acceptance, the processing and sitting with, right? Then it's about identifying the limiting beliefs that came as a result, right? And then starting to observe the thought patterns that come to surface on a daily basis, right? Because you'd be surprised how many times that thought crosses your mind and you don't even, and then you believe that that's you, you know? And until we start observing the thought and catching it, right? And then redirecting it, or creating enough space to where you don't believe the thought anymore. Either way works, right? But in the beginning, you might have to be a little bit more meticulous. Not for everyone, right? You can either create the space and just watch the thought and let it pass through like a river on a stream. And you're like, oh, that's the thought, right? As long as you don't believe the thought, that's the key, right? So the key is to not believe the thought. So if redirecting it and changing it works better for you, if you want more hands-on work, or stepping back and becoming an observer of the thought and letting it pass through, that's okay too. Because the thought never reaches the brainstem into your body unless you actually believe it and let it, okay? So now you're dissolving your consciousness from that thought, and you're disidentifying with that thought pattern, okay? And if you do that repetitively over time, like training your muscles at the gym, you're going to strengthen new neural pathways to rewire your brain into a new belief system, a new thought, right? That thought of I'm not good enough, that thought of I'm not lovable, that thought of I'm not likable, that thought of I need to perform and achieve in order to earn my inherent value, those neural pathways start to prune away, right? Through neuroplasticity, your brain's ability to change itself through repetition and external and input from the environment, right? So now you're using your brain as a friend, as a tool, as opposed to something that's your enemy, right? Rewire that thought. And once you start catching those thoughts and disidentifying with them, I want you to now come up with what's your truth. What's the new belief system? At the highest, most authentic version of yourself, what is the new belief? What is the new thought? Right? For me, it will be, I am inherently enough, and God created me perfectly, and He makes no mistakes. Right? I'm lovable and acceptable just the way I am right here, right now. I don't need to perform or achieve in order to earn my love and acceptance. Those are just examples, right? So come up with your own affirmation and your own phrases that resonates with you the most, with the words that you want to choose, that come off of your tongue authentically so that it could land in the noggin, okay? Now that we've done that, we disidentified with the thought, created the space and the awareness, and now we're creating new beliefs and thought patterns to install that into our neurochemistry. So in this case, what I want you to do is either different form of affirmations, okay? So you can do written affirmations, you can do verbally speaking affirmations, or you can do listening to affirmations, right? All are equally powerful, and honestly, if they're combined, they're even better. But you don't have to be a perfectionist here. Whatever resonates with you the most, or you can start one by one. Don't overwhelm yourself, okay? Me personally, I like to do all of them, but I think the most powerful is actually listening to them, right? So here's what I want you to do. You're gonna record your voice, in your own voice, those specific affirmations. So for me, I am inherently enough just the way I am. God created me perfectly and He makes no mistakes. I am lovable and acceptable right here, right now. I do not need to perform and achieve to earn my love and acceptance. So what I would do is I would get my voice recorder on my iPhone, if you have an iPhone, or you can just film a video of yourself and literally speak into the speaker and the camera in your voice in a calm, easy, well-spoken fashion. So the way I'm speaking right now, right? Very calm, slow, gentle, right? This is how I want you to speak with affirmation. This is going to help it land into your subconscious more, okay? Slower, calmer speaking, right? So this is how it would sound if I would say, I am enough just the way I am. I am inherently lovable and acceptable, and God makes no mistakes. I do not need to perform or achieve to be lovable and acceptable. See how it's super calm, super slow, right? This is going to help slow your brain waves down. And when you slow your brain waves down, the subconscious is going to open up and you're more suggestible in the moment. And what I want you to do is I want you to listen to this right when you're going to sleep every night, okay? And the reason why is when you're going to sleep, your brain waves slowly start to slow down from beta to alpha to theta and eventually delta, right? And your mind, your subconscious mind is the most programmable in those slower brain waves, right? From that theta, from the alpha to the theta to the delta. So right when you're in between that mode of half asleep, half awake, but drifting away into sleep, that's when your subconscious is the most suggestible. So play that recording as you go into sleep, and eventually it's going to get programmed into your subconscious mind over time, over repetition. And continue this for at least 100 days straight. And eventually, it'll start ingraining into your thought patterns, into your subconscious, and eventually you're going to start thinking differently. And it's going to happen over time, if you do it consistently. And eventually you'll be surprised, like, oh, I'm not thinking that thought anymore. Oh, wow, okay. Thinking a little differently. Okay, maybe I can do this. And eventually, as you think the more positive, constructive thoughts, that's going to become your belief system and your identity. Okay? And now, we could go on and on with this, but I want to keep it pretty simple. So, the fifth one, right? So, awareness, acceptance, right? And now sitting with the difficult emotions that arise. And the fourth one is identifying the limiting beliefs that surfaced as a result of that, and then the thought patterns that arise, and interrupting it, redirecting it, changing new thoughts and beliefs that are congruent to your higher self, doing the affirmations to get it ingrained into your subconscious. And then now that we've established a new framework of who we are in mind, body, soul, right? We're thinking differently, we're feeling differently about ourselves. Now, what we do is, this may be probably the second most challenging after the processing of the difficult emotions, is speaking up for our needs, right? Speaking up for our needs, speaking up for ourselves, and speaking what we truly feel in the moment authentically, right? So let me give you an example. Let's say I have a friend come over, right? And let's say he's late to the party, so to speak, right? He says he's gonna be here at 4 p.m. and he gets here at 6:30, right? Totally kind of blowing my time and lack of respect on his part, right? We agreed on 4 p.m. and he shows up at 6:30. So I have two choices in that moment. I can either just let it slide, right? And tell myself, oh, I don't want the conflict. What is he gonna think when I say that? Oh, he might not like me. He might, blah blah blah, right? Or I can let him know how I'm feeling in the moment because he was late, right? And there's a right way and a wrong way to do this, right? I'm not gonna get into all the details about boundary setting and how to do it, but there's videos on it. You can look it up, Eventually I'll probably cover it in a video, but with love and compassion and firmness, what I could say in the moment is, hey, John, I'm glad you got here safe. I really value our friendship and what we have here. And next time, I would greatly appreciate it if you stuck to our time that we originally planned for us. We planned to meet at 4 p.m. and it's 6:30 now. And I wasn't happy about that. Boom, clean like that, okay? See, I'm not blaming him. I stated the facts and I stated how I felt, right? Instead of saying, what are you doing? You were late, blah, blah, blah. And my tone of voice was very calm, calculated, but firm, okay? And now you're practicing speaking up for yourself. You're practicing that authenticity and allowing for your voice to be heard, right? And at that moment, he has two choices. He could either accept it and apologize, be like, hey, I'm sorry I was late, man. Yeah, just got caught up in traffic, next time I'll make sure to be on time. In that case, problem solved, right? Appreciate the apology. Or he could deny it, make excuses, and point the finger at me. Oh, why are you so sensitive? Why are you, oh, it was just traffic. It's not a big deal, blah, blah, blah. You see how it's a deflection pattern, right? So in that moment, now you can decipher, okay, this person is not respecting my needs and respecting what I'm saying. So is this person valuing me and my humanity? And is this person somebody that I want to be in my life moving forward, right? And the ultimate thing is, the important thing is that you spoke up for yourself. You set the boundary, you spoke up for yourself, and your body keeps a score and your soul remembers that, right? And the more times you do it, you develop more self-respect, more courage, and then your energy starts flowing again, right? You start to become more of a powerful magnetic presence because you're living in authenticity. If you look at the David Hawkins scale of consciousness, authenticity is up there at the very top, right? There's a reason for that. Your soul knows when you're living out of alignment, when you're not speaking your truth. And when you start to do that again, your energy flows again, right? You're more respected even by self and also by others, right? People can feel the authenticity. You're a respectable person, you're a dependable person, and more things will come your way as a result. And ultimately, you do not lose your soul, right? By trying to appease another, which is the hallmark of people pleasing, right? And you can practice this little by little throughout the day because it could be overwhelming for a people pleaser, right? To first start speaking up for yourself. So you can just small inconsequential moments and practice it, you know? Maybe, let's say you're eating out and then they cook your steak at the wrong temperature. You asked for medium rare, but they brought it out medium well. That's a perfect opportunity. No harm, no foul. It's a very inconsequential moment there, right? Yeah, the server might be a little annoyed, like, oh, fuck. But it's a good practice because they're not going to do anything, that's going to harm you, right? Might be a little annoyed, but that was their fault or the kitchen's fault, right? So that's a perfect example of, hey, this is what you say in that moment. Hey, server, get their attention. Hey, I appreciate you. You've been doing a phenomenal job so far with the service. I just noticed that my steak came out, looks more like medium well, and I asked for medium rare. Would you mind taking it to the back and fixing it up for me? Boom, super simple. And they'll be more than happy. Oh yeah, of course. Thank you so much. Appreciate you. Right? Super simple. And now you're giving yourself that voice again. You're speaking up, right? Developing that self-respect. Training the muscles of assertiveness, of vocal tonality, and of speaking your truth. And like any muscle, it takes practice, right? So starting with inconsequential moments that wouldn't sever a relationship, that wouldn't, put you at harm or risk in any way, shape, or form. So that restaurant example is a perfect thing. Or little things throughout the day, that you should have said something, but you didn't, right? Start practicing little by little, right? And then that complete package starts to become arranged, right? Starting with the awareness, right, of the childhood, what shaped who you are today, right? Then accepting the patterns of parents, caregivers, even yourself, where you're at right now and what happened in the past. Full acceptance, right? And then number 3 is processing the difficult emotions that arise as a result of putting awareness to what happened, right? And what's in you right here, right now. Number 4, identifying the limiting belief systems and thought patterns that were ingrained as a result of your upbringing and your perception of life now as a result, right? And then identifying the thought patterns that continue to arise in your current mind throughout your daily life that are limiting. I'm not enough. I'm not lovable. I can't do this. And then catching those thoughts and redirecting it, or observing it and letting it pass through, right? And then installing new beliefs and thoughts through affirmations. I am enough. I'm inherently enough. I'm lovable just the way I am. Whatever floats your boat. And then writing them down, listening to them, or speaking them out loud daily for 100 days, okay? And honestly, it's a good practice to do days after that too, because just like our bodies, we need to keep our minds sharp, right? And then the 5th one is practicing using your voice and speaking your truth throughout the day in small moments, right? So that you can train yourself so that when the big conversation comes up, you're able to stay grounded, present, and stay in assertive truth, right? So I hope I gave you a great overall picture of what people pleasing entails. I hope I gave you enough real life personal examples from my life and how it shaped my upbringing and how I came out of it, right? And I hope that you're able to take at least one thing, right? Preferably the whole package, because one doesn't come after the other, right? You can't have, the dinner is not complete with just the appetizer. You need the appetizer, the entree, and preferably a juicy dessert, right? So all those steps that I outlined works in unison, and one influences the other and vice versa, right? So finding time to implement this so that you can shift these patterns will be the greatest thing you can do for your mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual health. And it will have a direct correlation to the results that you produce in every area of your life, right? Because the more you can respect yourself, love yourself, and validate yourself from within, your energy starts flowing, and now you're not looking for the external environment to get your needs met. Not that we don't need people, but we're coming from an empowered, individuated state to where now we're an asset everywhere we go, because we're not taking from the environment, but now we're naturally giving because we're already filled. And we're not coming from this needy energy and this constant scanning, and now we're grounded within ourselves. We feel safe in our presence. As a result, we make other people feel safe in their presence, and the people that we attract are more ideal and authentic because now we are in our truth, right? So as we shift these patterns of people pleasing and come back to our own truth, we attract the people that are the same frequency and vibration, right? And now we're living in an aligned, authentic, and sovereign life. And that's my hope for every one of you, you know? And just know that it's possible to shift this, right? And I believe it's your responsibility for your loved ones, for your community, for yourself, right? To show up as your most authentic, aligned, true self, right? Because the world needs you. The world needs your unique medicine. And in order for the world to gain your unique medicine, you have to first come back to truth, right? And dissolve the patterns that are limiting you, right? That are limiting you from living your true highest version, right? So I hope this video helps. Leave a comment down below if it's helped you and what's helped you. If you want to go deeper with this work of mind, body, spirit transformation and some energy healing, transformational life coaching, any area of your life that you're struggling with, if you're having mental, physical health issues, if you're having blocks in business, if you're having blocks in your relationships, it all comes down to energy, right? When you change your energy, you change your life. And I can help you do that. If you want to go deeper, you can email me with the email in the description, or you can DM me on Instagram at heal_with_Yuki. And if not, totally cool. Just keep watching this free content. Make sure you like, subscribe, and also just hit me up if you want to connect. I want to hear from you, right? How you doing? And how are these videos helping you? Reach out. Can't wait to hear from you. Till next time, my name is Yuki Murai, and I'm out. Peace.